Before going into the more data-driven part of my presentation, I wanted to spend just a few minutes explaining what Lending Club does and how we do it. So Lending Club is really a credit marketplace. Similar to any other marketplace, we have two sides to it. So instead of having buyers and sellers, we have borrowers and investors. And essentially, investors provide the capital, borrowers take a loan, and we facilitate the loans, and we sort of underwrite and service the loans over time. And so unlike a bank that would sort of collect deposits and then extend loans, Lending Club is not involved in the sort of credit operation itself. So we don't take a balance sheet risk. All the capital comes from the investors. And being set up that way really helps us do a number of things. But really the primary benefit of being set up as a marketplace is that we can operate at a lower cost than the traditional banks. So one way we measure the cost efficiency is by looking at the operating expense ratio. That ratio for most banks is between 5 and 7%. So it's really all operating costs divided by total loans outstanding. That's between 5 and 7%. The same metric at Lending Club is less than 2%, and it's coming down quarter after quarter as we gain scale and we become more efficient. So a couple of reasons why we operate more efficiently than the banks. There are some costs that we do not incur at all. So we are available in a way that's exclusively online. We don't maintain a branch network, so that cost goes away. Because of the way we operate, we also don't take deposits, so we have no reserve requirements, we have no capital at risk, so we are very capital light, so we have no cost of capital, but also no sort of FDIC insurance costs that would come with the deposit-taking activity. So these costs we do not incur at all. And then the other costs that are associated with acquiring customers, underwriting loans, and servicing loans, we can lower these costs by really using technology to lower costs but also deliver a better experience. There are a number of ways we lower costs with technology. One example is the way most banks verify income and employment for borrowers is by asking for pay stubs and W-2s and having people review these documents. Our preferred way of verifying income and employment at Lending Club is by sending a query, an API call to ADP or Paychecks, those big payroll processing providers, and really instantly verifying employment and income. So that both lowers costs for us, but also delivers a better experience to the borrower because they don't have to go home and look for pay stubs or W-2s. So operating at a lower cost really helps us deliver more value to both sides of the marketplace. So this chart shows really in a way the intermediation costs of the banks, right? So if you look at in green the cost of the average cost of a credit card in the US, so the average credit card interest rate is just shy of 17%. So that's really the value delivered to borrowers. On the flip side, if you sort of go and deposit money on a high-yield savings account at a bank, on average, you'll earn a little bit over 0%. So that's a really big spread that shows sort of how inefficient really the banks have become in their role of sort of intermediary and in their role of allocation of capital from the source of capital for the individual depositors to the use of capital for the individual borrowers and small business owners. So Lending Club, in contrast, has an average interest rate of just over 12.5%, and so that's the value to borrowers, and has returned on average close to 8% net return after fees and after credit losses to investors. So our intermediation cost is a lot lower, and we pass on the cost savings to both borrowers in the form of a lower interest rate and investors in the form of a higher return. And that has helped us really grow faster. I'm stuck. All right. Delivering that much value to both borrowers and investors has really helped us grow quite fast over the last few years, really. So we've been controlling growth to a place where it's in between 100 and 150%. We could be growing faster based on supply and demand available to us, but we've chosen to sort of grow at the current pace as a matter of sort of controlling risk and especially controlling operational risk. There are a number of challenges that come with more than doubling the size of a company every year, especially at scale. So we have about 550 employees now. We hire roughly 100 people every 6 months. So we take a new floor in our office building every 6 months. We will be running out of floors soon. So it's just one anecdote. It's one challenge of growing fast, and there are many others. So what I'd like to talk about today in terms of data is really focusing on one way we use the data. So there are, really broadly speaking, 4 ways we use data: marketing, credit, fraud, and collections. And the reason I've chosen to talk about fraud today is partially because we're doing some interesting and innovative things in fraud detection, and also because I went to my chief marketing officer. I told him I was going to share some data. He said, no way. And I went to my chief credit officer. I said, I'm going to share some data. He said, no, you can't do that. So the fraud risk manager was the first person to say yes. So that's what we ended up with. Looking for fraud is a little bit like looking for a needle in a haystack. So this is our head of fraud at the office on a good day. So this chart shows a day of loan applications on the Lending Club platform. So it's an average day. There's about 9,000 applications coming to us during that day. And the little sort of red flag shows the number of potentially fraudulent loan listings that passed the sort of initial filter, and really were sort of the fraudulent loans that were listed on the platform before they got caught by sort of additional fraud detection mechanism and were delisted subsequently. So it's a handful of loans. It's less than 10 loans out of a population of 9,000. That happens every day, and so it is a needle in a haystack, but it is really material, because these sort of 10 or so fraudulent loan applications represent a total of about $140,000. So losing $140,000 every day wouldn't be a good outcome. So it's a small number of loans, but it's really important. So there are a number of predictors of fraud. So the first one we identified, because it was an obvious one, is really sort of time of the day of the application. We have a lot more fraudulent application at night. So that really helps us sort of start sort of narrowing down the choice and apply stricter fraud detection filters during the night time. So this chart shows in red the risk of fraud, and the length of each bar is the number of applications coming at each time of the day. So you can see that by chance, the sort of nighttime applications come in a much lower number, but they have a higher risk of fraud. So it's a good combination to help us narrow down some of our verifications. So the typical sort of banks are using sort of credit score, bank account information, and tax information really as their main sort of underwriting tools and fraud detection tools. We're using these tools as well, but we've enhanced the data set with additional sort of device information, what we call online footprint. That will include the IP address, the email address used by a customer. So for example, we look at the sort of age and popularity of an email address used to open an account. So if that email address was created last week and doesn't show up anywhere else on the internet, it's going to be more of a red flag than an email address that was created 5 years ago and it is associated with that particular person's name on various social networks. And we also use ads, so we also look at the application data. So a few data points that we thought were sort of interesting to share in terms of, for example, using the device as a other sort of way to predict fraud. PC versus mobile. So we've seen a much higher fraud rate on mobile and tablet than on PC and laptop. I don't have any particular insight as to why. But to an extent, it doesn't matter. In terms of fraud, we're really trying to correlate different data points without necessarily sort of looking for a causality. What matters is correlation in this case. Same thing with operating system. We've seen a higher fraud rate in terms of mobile OS with Android than Apple. So another sort of interesting type of device data that we use as a fraud predictor. So here we've ranked different sort of, operating system based on the fraud risk that we've observed, and the blue bar represents the popularity. So Windows 7 is the most popular mobile OS in terms of applications coming to Lending Club, but ranks fairly well in terms of fraud risk. Android, again, is the highest risk from that measure. Another way to look at different device data is looking at the browser type. And so we've seen, again, that Android is a higher sort of fraud risk than Internet Explorer. Our friends at Microsoft have paid us a lot of money to say that. But what's really interesting, so there's a piece of data we are not sharing today, which is credit. And actually, browser type ranks credit risk fairly well, all else being equal. We can share that specific data, but the fraud rate data is really interesting, and the sort of consistency of the Android sort of signal in terms of operating system and browser is quite amazing. So a lot of what we're trying to look for in fraud detection is consistency, right? So we're looking at a number of data points and trying to see if we're trying to gauge whether the person who's applying for a loan is the person he or she says she is. And so we look at the information provided by the applicant. We look at the sort of device sort of data, at the behavior of the person, at the online footprint, and at a number of other sources of information, and trying to detect whether these different data points point to the same person, to the same ownership of the machine, to the same location, for example. So one thing we use is IP address. And so in a case where the self-reported location, so the person filling in the application says, I have a San Francisco address, but the sort of IP address of the machine is in Atlanta, but there's a lot of social media cluster signal in different parts of the country that will also raise a red flag. And none of this indicates that there is that this is a fraud case necessarily. These are just signals, and we weight them in, and what we get here is really a red flag or no red flag, and when there is a red flag, that triggers additional information. So we wouldn't use that data in itself to decline a loan application necessarily. And so we really use some machine learning to continually assess the best predictors of fraud, whether it's internet footprint, behavior, external data sources. So we now look at over 1,000 of attributes, and we sort of constantly test the relevance or the sort of information value of these attributes. One thing we've done for a while that was really interesting was looking at, doing some natural language processing in the sort of application itself, and when borrowers come online and fill in a loan application, they have the option to tell us what they're going to use the loan for, and so we use that little sort of text description, free text description. We also look at the other sort of free text entries like job title, and really a lot of these, a lot of the words used or the either in the job title or in the application are also interesting predictor of risk and of credit risk and risk of fraud. So I'd like to conclude with this chart. I mean, that shows here the percentage of attempted fraud to the Lending Club platform as a percentage of total application. And what we've seen over the last 3 years is the percentage of fraud attempts has decreased. Obviously, the percentage of successful frauds has decreased even more. But it's interesting to see that when, and it's I think a reflection I wanted to leave you with, which is in fraud management, I mean, what really matters is not to be smarter than the fraudsters, is to be smarter than the next guy, so that we started to develop a reputation in the market that fraudsters will understand that it's harder to sort of successfully defraud the Lending Club platform, and they would try to defraud a different target. So I think we've been successful in sending fraudsters to some of our platforms. None of them are here tonight, obviously. Right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? One here. Name and company, please.
Yes, Mario Baldi, Narus. You said that you're using, for example, Facebook information to detect whether there was a fraud. How do you get that information? Do you ask the user to give you access to their Facebook profile and then you use the Facebook API, or do you have other ways? And the second question I have is, you're talking about fraud attempts. Do you have a way to know if those were really fraud attempts, or you guess they were, but you don't really know? Thanks.
That's right. So to the first question, this is a third-party technology that gives us sort of age and popularity of email address. So we haven't developed that technology, and we can't talk about what's behind it. The second question is interesting. So what we mean by fraud attempt is what we believe is a fraud attempt, but we won't necessarily verify that it was indeed a fraudulent application. So it might be us being overly conservative, and there might be a lot of false positive in there, but that's our way to protect us and protect our investors against the risk of fraud.
Sar Golder from Knowledgent. So you said that the lenders get about 9% return on their investment. Do you know what's the hourly rate that they get? Like when you weigh how long they spend on the website and how much they invest?
So our investor, we have a really different type of investors. There are investors who like to be sort of very involved in sort of choosing every specific loan and sort of reinvesting manually via the monthly proceeds that come from the portfolio, and it gets pretty addictive. I mean, there are so people spending a lot of time on the website. We also have now different services for people who are less of a stock picker, but more the sort of mutual fund buyers, and they can sort of set up some criteria and really automate the process. So we have a sort of automated investing tool that really does the work for investors, so they can sort of really set it and forget it.
This might actually be a question for all of the panelists, but anyways, I'm wondering if people are very careful about their online presence, if someone's using, say, Ytopia as an anonymizer so that their IP address isn't shown, they don't share a lot on Facebook, does that really mean that they can't become your customer?
No, so we, I mean, we also use some technology that gets to the sort of true IP of the machine. So if you were to use a proxy server, we would detect it. That wouldn't in itself prevent someone from being a customer. It's really one signal that we use among many other signals. And again, it helps raise a red flag occasionally, but there are many other ways we can detect fraud, and many other ways we sort of screen for credit and other parameters that help us decide if someone can take a loan from Lending Club or cannot.
Very cool.
Right. Thank you.